The Trapper is the mascot of DBD, featured in various game trailers, promotional artwork, as well as being the first ever character created and one of the free characters that most beginners will start with. However, something that a lot of the community will agree on is that the Trapper is one of the weakest characters in the game, consistently being rated as one of the worst in various content creator tier lists for over 5 years. Even his kill rate is not impressive, as the Trapper rocks the worst kill rate in high MMR. A lot of Trapper mains have been begging the developers for buffs or even slight reworks to his power, but surprisingly, the developers have officially confirmed in the latest Reddit AMA that they are satisfied with the performance of the Trapper and that they have no changes planned for him. So, does this make sense? A lot of players got heated after hearing this.
Our data shows that his kill rate is pretty much where we want it to be.
But the truth is actually more complex than it seems on the surface. So let's take a deep dive into the Trapper and explain the reason behind the position of behavior and why it's so hard to make any changes to the Trapper. Let's first start with the issues that the Trapper has that make him deserving of the F tier. The first issue, and by far his biggest issue, is that the Trapper has an extremely slow early game. Basically, unlike the rest of characters that can go and search for survivors at the start, the Trapper starts with no power at all. You have to set the bear traps yourself. You have to manually go to each trap in order to pick it up, and some traps can have horrible spawns that will take a lot of precious time out of you. This means that you cannot take advantage of perks like Lethal Pursuer, and also, if you don't set up your bear traps, you are essentially a powerless character with no map pressure or map traversal. Another character suffering from this issue is Michael Myers, regarded by many as another very weak character, and that's because of his very slow start at the beginning of the match. However, if you find a survivor very early in the game, this is fantastic for Myers or any other character, but for the Trapper, this could potentially mean the loss of the game. If you decide to chase that survivor you see early in the match, we go back to being a powerless character who didn't set his bear traps. If we do not chase this survivor, we run the risk of our power being completely countered, as that survivor will be able to see in which area you are setting up your traps. And this is a great segue to the second big issue that the Trapper has: extremely easy counterplay by coordinated teams. The Trapper is one of the only characters in the game that can be left powerless against a good team. Characters that suffer from this problem are the Hag, the Oni, and the Singularity, and something you will see in common is that all of those characters suffer massively in competitive play because a coordinated team can counter their powers for as long as possible. However, unlike the Trapper, Hag and Singularity can just replace their powers with a time cost, and they can also teleport across the map, and the Oni can eventually completely snowball the match with a good mechanical use of his power. The Trapper has nothing and can do nothing, as there is no mechanical power found in his bear traps. Instead, it's all knowledge. If a bear trap placement is found, the trap is rendered almost useless as long as a survivor keeps harassing it, and the only solution is to either rearm that trap, which means physically going there with no movement power or boost and rearming the trap manually, or you have to pick that trap up and place it somewhere else. Also, unless you are using one iridescent add-on, there is zero penalty for survivors to counter his power. For example, with the Skull Merchant, each survivor that is tracked with a drone will provide a speed boost to Skully, and if you open the box against Cenobite, you are essentially revealing your location that allows Cenobite to teleport to you and start an immediate chase. With Trapper, there is zero penalty. In my personal opinion, these two issues are by far his biggest drawbacks. However, these are not the only problems he has. A lot of players see that there are 5 more weird design decisions that should be changed, and those are: number 1. There is no penalty for an injured survivor to step on a trap. You don't even get deep wounds, you just escape the trap and he has to rearm it again. Number 2. Rainbow maps reveal the location of the bear traps. Considering that the devs are against items that counter killer powers, it's weird how this is still a thing in the game. Number 3. Escaping from a bear trap has an RNG element attached to it, as you can escape on your first try, or it can take you 6 attempts. Number 4. He is extremely map dependent, and his traps are also very easy to see on some maps, and even more when a survivor has filters applied to their screen. And number 5. The trapper can step into his own traps, punishing him severely, and also the hitbox of the bear traps makes it so that survivors can maneuver against a poorly placed trap while you are forced to either take it or get trapped. So now that we know his weaknesses, can we just tweak him so he stops having those issues? Well, like I said at the start, this is actually not as simple as it sounds. I believe that in order to discuss the topic of the trapper's balance, we have to see things more from a game design perspective rather than a player's. And this is because of 2 unique qualities to the trapper that are very important to his core design. The first core of the trapper is that he serves as the starter character in Dead by Daylight, which means that the trapper's design has to be very basic mechanically and simple to understand. The trapper is the character you will use while playing in the tutorial, and as such, most players will play the trapper as their first pick whenever they start to learn the game. Think of the trapper as the Ashe of League of Legends or Shelly from Brawl Stars. These characters are very easy to understand and they are designed for starters in mind. For that reason, adding any complex mechanics like a secondary power, different types of traps, or special passives or status effects would defeat this core of the trapper. And we know that the devs take this very seriously. The second core of the trapper is that he was designed with a completely different mentality from the start, and this is because he was created with immersion over gameplay first. Unlike the majority of characters nowadays, which come with inflated kits that help with anti-loop or that induce a status effect to the survivors in order to slow the game down or make the killer stronger, the trapper was created purely for the horror aspect of Dead by Daylight rather than the gameplay. The trapper starts the match with bear traps, and he has to manually set them up all around the map. He has to physically go to a place and carefully place the bear traps, and they are also limited, so you need to think if it's worth it to spend a bear trap on this loop or save it for another one, so it even has some of that resource management element on it. Now compare this with the Singularity, who can just instantly plop biopods whenever they want to, and they have infinite biopods that they can just recycle whenever he hits the cap, and this was all done with a purpose, and that purpose was that the trapper had the horror immersion of feeling like a mastermind that will carefully prepare the demise of the survivors. Stepping into your own traps was a fair punishment for not planning correctly, and it added an extra layer of thought to never forget any traps you place so they don't bite you back. The game was not as fast paced as it is now, and survivors were truly scared of the killers unlike now. My point with this second core is that the trapper was designed for another game in mind, a game that we do not have nowadays, a game where gen rushing doesn't exist, and survivors actually spend their time hiding around the map because of fear of being seen. And this means that the trapper's power is basically fundamentally flawed for current DBD. In fact, a character that has a very similar fate to the trapper is the Trickster, and you might call me a madman, but let me explain first. Both of those characters have potentially some of the most oppressive powers in the entire game, and at the same time, some of the worst powers as well. If a trickster finds you in the open or in a low wall loop, you are dead. It doesn't matter your skill level, how good you dodge, trickster will eventually down you and there is nothing you can do. However, in a structure like the shack, suddenly trickster becomes one of the weakest characters in the entire game, and the exact same feeling is applied to the trapper. Conceptually, the trapper's power is insanely strong, as it completely cancels an entire loop with just one bear trap placement, and also has potential to end a chase immediately. There is no mechanic skill involved. As long as a loop is trapped and you attempt to loop it, you will get trapped unless you previously know that there was a trap there. With the trapper, you will notice, at least based on my anecdotal experience and the vast amount of trapper gameplays I have seen, that in most of the matches, you are either completely powerless as survivors ignore your bear traps, or you completely steamroll the match by snowballing with one good trap. The trapper has the potential to become one of the most oppressive characters in the entire game, and if we learned something from Trickster, Skull Merchant and the Knight, is that this is not good for the health of DBD. So by buffing Trapper too much, you run the risk of creating one of the most unfun characters to go against. This is a very complicated stance to be as a character in any video game, as most of the time, the only options game developers have is to either keep those characters as is, or completely rework them because their power is flawed. And if we rework the Trapper, we circle back into the core number 1, as we have to create a very basic and simple power that new players will understand. And now, ask yourself this question: why would the devs waste their time creating and coding a new simple power for the Trapper that will not generate any revenue at all? Why not make a new DLC character instead that will bring new money? As we can see, the Trapper is not overperforming. He is not a problematic character like the Nurse, Skull Merchant, or the Blight with Alchemist's Ring. I personally believe that this is the main reason why Behavior seems to be afraid of changing the Trapper, and they are happy with his performance currently, even if the majority of the community feels like the Trapper sucks a lot. It took Trapper 5 years in order to get a simple change of having 2 traps on his inventory. It's almost exaggerated how little they seem to touch him. Then let's dissect some of the most popular balance changes suggested by the community and explain the reasons why Behavior possibly didn't do them. Probably the suggestion that you have heard the most, and I always thought that it was a great idea, is that the Trapper starts the match with all of his traps in his inventory, just like the purple sack add-on he has, only without the downside. This would solve one of his biggest problems, and that's the slow start, since now he wouldn't have to worry about the RNG nature of the bear traps, which will also lead to more useful traps for him, as currently some of the bear traps spawn so far away from the objectives that you basically never pick them up, and you end up playing with less bear traps in the entire match. However, I think this suggestion has some slight problems with it, and it's mainly with the inherent problems that the game has currently. Let's create this hypothetical situation where the Trapper starts with 8 bear traps from the start. Now, the Trapper is not incentivized at all into moving or roaming around the map. Instead, the most logical and efficient approach would be to either trap at regen from the start like the Skull Merchant does, or to not use all of your traps at the start and instead save some of them, try to down a survivor in the early game, and then camp that survivor and place bear traps all around them, and bonus points if it's a basement. Survivor mains can already see the problem that this offers, as both of those gameplay options are not engaging at all for survivors. As anyone that played against Basement Trapper can agree, the most efficient tactics for the Trapper would be to either camp a regen or camp a survivor. And you might argue that every single killer can do this, but not all of them promote it. Singularity, Wesker, Blight, Nurse, Huntress, Demogorgon, all of those characters promote fun and mechanically complex gameplay from the killer side during a chase, and they also intend to make the chase experience be fun for survivors too. You absolutely can camp, tunnel, or 3-gen with all of them, but that experience is more boring than playing the intended way. However, with the Trapper, there is no mechanical complexity at all. His power is setting up bear traps at the start of the match and whenever he wants. Killers will always take the most fun approach, but when there is no fun approach, then players will take the easiest approach that will allow them to win more efficiently, which was the problem with the Knight and Skull Merchant. This Trapper 3-gen and camping is something you can absolutely do with the current kit, even help yourself with the purple bag or with certain add-ons, and I believe that this fact still proves that this is not that good of an idea. We also cannot forget that the Trapper is a simple, beginner-friendly character. In a way, the current system of the Trapper incentivizes newcomers to move around the map in order to collect bear traps, trapping various places depending on where you are, and essentially teach beginners how to roam. By giving him all 8 traps, new players will simply start trapping every single loop and pallet that is found where they spawn, and they will play like a simple M1 character. In fact, in the long run, it will essentially not fix anything of the Trapper, as you will still end up having to collect the bear traps manually or having to reset them by hand. Either way, the RNG spawning of the bear traps is very bad, and it takes way too much time from the early game, by far the most important time in the match, and it's frustrating. Another solution I have seen a lot is to allow the Trapper to collect bear traps from lockers. Potentially, this is even worse than starting with all traps, because not only will it require new code, a new animation, and a new mechanic to be introduced in the game, it will also lead to more or less the same problems we have right now. In maps with bad locker placements like the swamp, you would still have to go out of your way to pick up bear traps, and also you will have to manually reset or pick up your bear traps in the long run either way. Bear traps are finite resources, unlike the Huntress or the Trickster's projectiles, so you either end up not being able to reload bear traps in lockers, or the devs would have to code a mechanic that will teleport the oldest trap to you from the locker. This single change can take months to develop and be approved, not counting the bugs it might bring, like kill switching flashbang, because suddenly lockers give bear traps to survivors. The most new player friendly approach towards tackling this issue with the Trapper is to have you start with 2 bear traps in your inventory and make every single bear trap in the map spawn close to generators, similar to the spawn logic of Sadako's televisions. This way, you have 2 bear traps that you can set up at the start, and immediately the game incentivizes you to start roaming generators in order to pick up your next bear trap, teaching new players about the importance of doing so at the start of the match. And you also fix the issue of having bear traps so far away from important objectives that you end up not going there at all, like that random corner in the swamp with 1 trap that no sane killer should ever go to. However, my most attentive viewers would have noticed that I just made a contradictory statement. I said earlier that one of the problems of the Trapper is that if a survivor is found at the start of the match, it hurts the Trapper's ability of hiding bear traps correctly, and potentially leads to that survivor disarming all bear traps for their team. Placing bear traps near generators significantly increases the chances of you finding a survivor early in the match. Well, that is because this is not the only change that the Trapper will need in order to make him better. I fully believe that in order to properly balance the Trapper, behavior has to do a lot of small tweaks in order to make sure we don't end up with a boring character again. So let's go straight to bear traps. In order to make the trapper fun, a type of back and forth is needed in order to make trapper less frustrating to play as and against. Now, how about disarming bear traps? Right now there is no skill check associated with it, and instead survivors simply hold a button to disarm the bear trap. They can cancel it at any point they want with no repercussions, and they can keep disarming traps as well with no penalty. One suggestion I have seen is to introduce the Merciless Storm skill check system into disarming a bear trap, and punish survivors that miss those skill checks or that get interrupted by the trapper while disarming a trap. However, we run into the core problem number 1, where this mechanic is too complex for new survivors and it is not explained anywhere else except a licensed niche perk and a very specific glyph challenge, and this honestly is completely useless against good survivors. So it would be better if there is no skill check associated with a bear trap. However, I like the idea of punishing survivors that get interrupted while disarming a bear trap. But yet again, making this a reality could make the trapper become one of the most annoying characters in the game, as there would be no counter to a basement camping or proxy camping trapper. We run the risk of making this character too oppressive to play against. The point of changes should be to make the killer more fun to play as and against, not to make the trapper obnoxious, because we already have enough of those archetype characters. So another idea I have seen suggested a lot is to add an agitation state for the trapper. Every time a bear trap is disarmed, the trapper receives a temporal speed boost in order to help him catch up to a survivor faster, or to help him reach the disarmed bear trap faster. This would also apply to the survivor getting caught on a bear trap. As long as a survivor is caught in one, the trapper will get an adrenaline boost where he would run considerably faster in order to try and catch the trapped survivor. Considering that the maximum time this would be in effect is 6 seconds, and how catching survivor is a rarity in an average match, it doesn't sound very overpowered on paper. This also perfectly fits with the character of the trapper, as one of his perks, called Agitation, says that he gets excited with the anticipation of hooking a survivor. But this mechanic has two slight problems with it. The first one is that it could be a complicated mechanic for new players to understand, as it's a limited time speed boost for each disarmed bear trap or trap survivor. Even if it sounds extremely simple, it's easy to dismiss new players and their lack of knowledge. Besides, I am not a developer at BVHR, so I don't know what their vision is regarding the trapper, as all I can do is speculate. The second issue that this mechanic can lead to is frustration of the players due to the fact that it's an RNG based speed boost that depends on another survivor interacting with your bear traps. Let's imagine this scenario. For example, you are being chased by a trapper, and suddenly an injured Bill has stepped into a bear trap far away from you. Now the trapper gets a speed boost that allows him to down you, and suddenly, because of one of your teammates' mistake into stepping into a trap, not only was the trapper able to catch you because of something completely out of your control as a player, but also 50% of the team is currently downed, or potentially a 75% of the team if one of the survivors is already sacrificed or in a hook. This is a brutal state to be in a match. It's basically a lost match for the vast majority of solo survivors or casuals, and that's the key here, because this would not happen against a survive with friends. A survive with friends would know when to disarm a bear trap. They would also know when to play safe and not attempt any stupid maneuvers. Basically nothing is solved because the trapper is still dog water, and the adrenaline thing does not help at all against survive with friends, which is by far the biggest counter to the trapper. We come to a new potential problem that, with just a single change that a lot of the community wants, makes the trapper a new Cenobite type of character where solo survivors suffer vastly more compared to survive with friends because they are simply less coordinated. I think if the adrenaline mechanic is added into the game, maybe it should only work while the trapper is not in a chase. But I still think this is a perfect example of how one very asked mechanic does not solve basically anything about this character. The reason I made this video so long is to showcase how a simple character like the trapper is so complex to change, rework or buff without making him either the same trash character he has always been and improve nothing, or without making him extremely oppressive to play against. I wanted to showcase with various examples why some design choices are taken by behavior. In fact, the only true solution I see to the trapper is to make his add-ons more interesting to use with wilder effects, simply because add-ons are means to bypass the first core of the trapper, as there is a minimal chance of a new player to play with a very rare or iridescent add-on on their first hours while playing Dead by Daylight. I didn't even mention the map problems that the trapper has, as due to the new maps being so open and with almost no grass, it is very hard for the trapper to hide traps. Should traps be buried inside the ground, leaving only the spikes visible in order to make it easier for the trapper to hide his bear traps? Should grass be grown? Should the bear traps take another color? And how about the trapper being trapped by his own bear traps? Do we make his brown makeshift wrap add-on a base kit, or do we keep this mechanic in the game for some reason? So after all the debate and discussion based on the arguments presented, I believe the final changes the trapper 100% needs is improving the spawn logic of bear traps to remove the RNG aspect of having to search for them in very distant locations, implementing a penalty for survivors who step into bear traps while already injured, which introduce consequences for their choices and provides a slight advantage for the trapper, removing the ability of maps to reveal the aura of bear traps, as this mechanic goes against behavior's own game design, eliminating the RNG aspect of bear traps by replacing the chance of escaping with a progress bar mechanism, ensuring a predictable and consistent experience for both survivors and the killer. Every single one of these changes is an objective benefit towards the trapper, and also it doesn't remove his identity or the reason trapper mains exist, and it also doesn't make him obnoxious to play against. As for any other changes, that completely goes for behavior to decide, but I still hope that this video proves that game design and character balance is a very complicated topic. I tried to summarize everything as best as I could, and there is still potential conversations and ideas to be had about the trapper, just one of the 32 killers in the game, and I invite you to comment your thoughts in the comment section. If you have any other suggestions, or if you disagree with any of my takes, please let me know. Thank you and have a nice day.